Good morning. We are chatting today about the post-COVID workplace. And what we want to chat about today is what our lives are going to look like when we start to return to work. Now, we've noticed that restrictions are starting to lift and we're able to start to continue to work forward now and return to our workplaces. But we want to start to look at what that actually looks like and how that's going to impact us and what we need to be considering in actually moving back into our workplace environments. So if we start to look at what our pre-COVID workplaces look like, there was quite a mix. Many organisations were still sitting in quite densely occupied workplace environments that didn't have a lot of amenity or facility in them, and they were purely there to house us and to accommodate us and actually going to work every day and sitting at a desk. So we had lots of different types of things. And what I started to see with the workplaces that we were working with is that people were shifting away from having multiple work points for people to sit at in forms of just workstations and small amenities and facilities like kitchens and those sorts of things. So what we've seen is workplaces were purely about providing somewhere for someone to go and sit from 9 to 5 to actually do their job, and that they had the basic amenities and facilities that they needed to have there as well. So those basic amenities and facilities were a tea point or, somewhere that they could make their lunch and have a coffee, and a bunch of meeting rooms as well. So there wasn't much variety in the way that people were able to work because of the way that our workplaces were constructed. They were quite a traditional, older style of work environment. So that was starting to shift as people were starting to adopt technology and the ability that actually gave us from a flexibility perspective. We were starting to see a transition in terms of how we actually created our workplace environments. And what I start to think is going to happen is that COVID is continuing to fast track that even further. So we've actually been able to see and feel what our workplaces are about. So we've been able to prove that we can actually work from anywhere, that we don't physically need to go to an office to work, and that we can work remotely. So what we have also identified though is that what we are missing in all of this is that physical human connection. That place where we can go and we can collaborate and we can connect with our colleagues, that we can brainstorm, that we can innovate together, and that we feel some sort of social connection to one another, but also to the organisations that we work for, that purpose around why we work for that particular organisation, what it is that they are striving to achieve, what their goals are, what their values are. So that is actually what's missing. So what we want to start to look at is the fact that we don't actually physically need to go to work, but we need to go there so that we can connect with one another, both to the organisation and to each other, that we can collaborate and that we can communicate. So if we're going to be getting out every day and actually commuting to somewhere, we need to be thinking about what that place is going to be offering us, because that commute time that we've had, we've actually been repurposing that. We've used that extra hour or plus in our day to do something different with it, whether it's to hang out with the kids, to go and do some exercise, just some personal time even. So we've looked at what we can do with that commute time and we've used it elsewhere. So if we're going to have to give that up now and go back into our workplace environments, it needs to be for a reason that we're actually going to be wanting to, part with that additional time that we've taken back through this whole process. It also needs to make sure that people feel safe. And the reason it needs to make people feel safe is that we've been through something that we've never experienced before. We are now exposed to a virus that has had significant consequences on our own personal health. And there are going to be people on various ends of the spectrums. So there's going to be people like myself who are not so concerned about germs and quite comfortable going back into the workplace and going out into public and connecting in with other people. But there are going to be other people on the far extreme of that who are going to be highly sensitive to exposing themselves, or they could actually be at quite a risk as well. So they might have high levels of risk from their own personal health that we need to take into consideration. And so there's going to be different factors that we're going to see, and there's going to be people sitting all along this continuum of feeling, not too concerned about it and to being very highly concerned. So we need to be looking at everyone's physical health and their mental and emotional health as well as we transition them back into our workplace environments. So what I want to ensure that we don't see is that we don't end up with these Dilbert-style workstations coming back in, or the madman offices. So high levels of petitioning, segregating everybody out, separating everyone up. I would really like to hope that we don't return to that kind of work environment, and that we can find a happy medium. I'd also like to see that we don't return back into having everyone into individual work environments, so everyone back into offices and that madman style. But we do need to consider how we can create physical separation from each other as we transition back into the work environment. So the changes that are going to need to happen in our new environments as we return back into the workplace are going to need to be both physical, but they're also going to need to be behavioural as well. It's a change that needs to occur across a larger spectrum. We need to be looking at how my own individual behaviour is impacting others around me, but then also how the physical environment can then guide that behaviour, and how it can nudge me to perform in a way that is conducive with that of the organisational operational requirements. But all of this needs to start at home, because if we're not healthy and well when we leave the house, then we're only putting everyone else at risk. So we need to be conscious of the fact that, am I feeling unwell? Am I healthy? If I've got the slightest bit of a sniffle or a cold, we used to just trounce ourselves off to the office, and we'd go to work, and we'd probably get halfway through the day and go, oh, actually I don't feel so good, I'm going to go home. We can't do that anymore. If we're unwell, we should not leave the house. We shouldn't be exposing everyone else to that. If we do have work that we need to get done, we've proven that we can actually do that at home. So let's stay at home and let's do it at home, and then not continue to expose everyone else to it. So some of the things that we're going to need to think about from a physical perspective as we transition back into our workplace environments, and it's going to be different for every organisation. So it depends where you are on that journey already. What does your workplace currently look like? Does it enable high levels of density? Does it have space for people to break out? Does it encourage communication and collaboration? What you need to be considering is where your workplace environment sits on that spectrum at the moment. And you might also find that some of the things that you need to do from a short-term solution are not going to be that invasive, and they're not going to be that cost prohibitive. They're not going to need a complete physical redesign of your work environment, but it is on a case-by-case basis, and you need to be looking at what you need to be doing as an organisation to be able to facilitate some of this. The other thing though is on the far end of that is what we're going to need to do from a longer term solution. So longer term, what do we need to be considering, and how do we need to be managing our workplaces so that they're actually supporting us in doing our work? And this is what we've been looking at as workplace strategists for quite some time, is you need a strategy. You need to understand what the tasks and activities are that your people need to perform on a daily basis, and how your workplace then supports them in actually achieving their goals that they need to do every day. So just thinking about the different process and the steps that needs to happen in order to connect into that. So some of the physical things that we need to be thinking about are visual cues. How can we visually guide people to align with the requirements that we need? So whether that's through signage, whether that's through, Erin's laughing, that's so true. We need to be guiding people. So how are we putting signage down to direct traffic? How are we reminding people about the actions that we need them to take behaviourally? So giving people physical visual reminders. That's really important in terms of guiding behaviour. So we often talk about nudging people's behaviour when we look at design, and so that's helping people make the right choice, the easy choice. So making it as simple as possible for people to align with the requirements that we're putting in place. Another one is having one-way traffic. So having one door to enter the workplace, another door to exit the workplace, and then thinking about how we can actually structure all of our meeting rooms and everything else so that we're actually walking in a singular direction, so we're not crossing over, and we're actually maintaining those physical distances that we need to be working to. Increased cleaning is going to be another one, and it's about also then enabling people to self-clean. So introduction of sanitisation stations, providing the ability for people to actually self-sanitize their work areas. When we've started to introduce communal type workplaces and more agile work environments, providing people with the ability to clean down their workstation between users, that helps maintain that level of cleanliness that we need to do, but it also becomes a behavioural change for each of us individually. We also want to look at whether or not we need to alternate desks or stagger desks. So depending on the size of your workstations, to maintain that physical distance between myself and the next person, it may mean that you need to have the workstation in between particular workstations vacant. So every second desk is occupied rather than actually physically removing desks. We were laughing about it this morning, and we don't want to go into workplaces and see great big red X's stuck on desks. Think of another way that could potentially be physically communicated to people from a visual cue. Maybe we take away the chair on every second desk, or you put a pot plant on it. Something that indicates to people that desk is not to be used, so that we can maintain some of those physical distances that we need to when we're actually returning to work. Also thinking about how we're sitting. So most workstations will have a back-to-back arrangement. So there'll be somebody sitting on the opposite side of the screen to myself. Rather than having people sitting opposite each other, consider alternating them so that everyone's sitting on a diagonal. So every second desk on this row, and maybe it's like every third desk on the next row, so that everyone's not facing each other. That's also good to consider in terms of communal workplace spaces as well. So in the kitchens and the cafes and breakout spaces, how can we create further separation between people by the way that we set up the arrangement of the space? Removing waste bins is another one that we've thought of is going to be a really big thing, because everyone's putting their own personal rubbish into the bin underneath their desk. They're sitting there all day, they're not getting cleaned out. So having a centralised waste stations rather than everyone having individual waste stations, it's also going to mean that germs aren't sitting there and spreading in the general work vicinity, that all of that stuff is then being put into a generalised waste area. Mobile pedestals and drawers as well, they're another one that people harbour all their own individual items in. You'd be surprised what you actually will find in those drawers when you actually open them up. So getting rid of some of those things too, so that you don't have all of that storage stuff sitting around a work area, but it's nice and open and it's clean. Clean desk policies is going to be another big one that's going to come with that as well. Removing excess chairs from meeting rooms. So if your meeting rooms have got all of these chairs in it and that's actually condensing the number of people in those environments, look at reducing the number of chairs in those spaces so that it actually reduces the number of occupants that are going into those meeting rooms as well. Now the next one is going to be around behavioural change, and I think this is actually going to be the bigger piece of the pie when we start to think about how we return into the work environment. As I've said, there are short-term solutions that we need to be thinking about from a physical construction perspective, but from a longer-term perspective, I think we need to be thinking about what are the tasks and opportunities that we need to be doing in the work environment, and how can we then recreate those going forward when we actually understand how we work and what we need to actually work. So from a behavioural perspective, thinking about scheduling and staggering shifts. So does everybody need to come in on a particular day? No. So let's think about who needs to be in the office, when they need to be in the office, and what they need to be doing in that office, and staggering out those shifts so that we haven't got an influx of people into the work environment. Cleaning in and cleaning out. So making sure that we're encouraging good behavioural hygiene practices. We are facilitating that with sanitisation stations on the way in and on the way out. So being conscious about our own personal health and safety as we're coming into the work environment. Am I physically well? Do we need to be doing temperature checks as we come in to confirm that our body temperature isn't elevated and indicating that there's something wrong and some sort of infection happening in our bodies? Thinking about that, making sure that I'm taking personal responsibility for being clean and hygienic as I enter into the work environment, and then also taking that same responsibility as I exit and take onto my commute home, making sure that I'm clean and I'm healthy and I'm then not contributing any disease out into the general work environment. Introducing standing and walking meetings. Now these have been around for quite a while now and we've all been adopting them, but actually considering that to become part of the norm. By having standing meetings or walking meetings, we're actually shortening the length of the meeting because we can make it shorter, sharper, quicker. And if we're doing a walking meeting, we're actually getting out, we're getting fresh air. We're also not face to face, so we can actually then start to see different opportunities there, so that we're not contributing disease and sharing our germs with each other because we're facing away from each other and we're out in a more open air environment. Continuing our virtual meetings. So we've all been working this way for at least the last 6 weeks now. We've been connecting over Skype and Zoom and Teams and all sorts of other virtual collaboration platforms, continuing that into the future. We've demonstrated that it is possible, and reducing the number of visitors that are coming into our workplace environments, and therefore reducing the risk of contamination and infection from an outside source. But then, continuing that traffic flow is another one again. Say goodbye to the handshake. Unfortunately, that is going to be one of the things that we're going to have to consider in terms of how we reintroduce ourselves, and I think that's going to be one of the longest standing ones, so that we're actually not physically touching. Considering our sick leave again, and as I said, if you're not well, staying at home, and then the response from the organisation around that, I think, is going to be very different. And you used to say, "Oh, I've got a headache, can't come into work today," and there would be the responses like, "Oh, slack it off again." That's not going to happen anymore, because as soon as someone says, "Oh, I'm not feeling well," everyone's going to go, "Yep, that's fine, no problems. You stay at home, you get well. If you need to log in, you do that at home, but stay at home and don't bring your germs into the workplace." And I think that's going to be something that we're going to be seeing a lot more of. Taking our coffee orders through our apps, there's apps like Bopple and those sorts of things. So ordering your coffee through the app, then your pickup station's a lot quicker. There's less transference of germs. There's no money or even a card being transacted. So that physical low touch scenario is what's going to happen as we start to move through. Is lots of ways that we can look at not having to touch things, even coming down to like visitor sign-ins. So looking at how we can do that with no touch, so that we're actually not contributing and sharing any of those germs. One of the things that I think we need to really look at from a behavioural situation too is how we work and meet. Now, as a workplace dynamics strategist, what I look at when I go in and I start working with organisations is understanding how each organisation actually operates, who talks to who, what are the tasks and activities that people do, and then what does that mean from a workplace environment perspective? What do they physically need in order to be able to do their job? So I think when we go back into the workplace environment, we really need to be reconsidering that and thinking about what it is that we need to do. So from an example perspective, when we have a meeting, what is the actual purpose of that meeting? So what are the steps that we go through? So we need to collate all of the information that we need in order to prepare ourselves for the meeting. Well, that can all get done remotely and prior to the meeting. When we actually have the meeting, that's when we should be collaborating, connecting, innovating. So we do that together, and we do that in our workplace environment. But then we can go away and we can actually do the work, we can create the content, and we can distribute the content all remotely. So when we start to break down the tasks and activities in terms of our daily requirements and the work that we need to perform, what we want to understand is, what is it that we need to do? How do we need to do it? Where do we need to do it? So if we can break that down, it actually means that we don't need to be in the office as much as we previously have been, because the requirements of that office has changed. We only need to be there to physically interact and connect, collaborate, to socialise, but the actual performance of work can happen remotely. That piece doesn't need to happen in the office, so therefore the need for us to have all of these workstations, that's going to shift. But what will happen is there are going to be people who do want to come back to the work. They might not have a productive work from home environment. It might be difficult for them. They might not have the right setup. They might not have the right internet capacity. These last 6 weeks may have been an absolute nightmare for some people, and they can't wait to get back into the workplace environment because it enables them to be productive. And that's going to happen as well. And we just need to be conscious of that. So much of what I've shared is not new, but it's about reminding ourselves about what it is that we need to do and how we need to perform it. So as a workplace strategist, I've been saying and doing much of this for many, many years with the clients that I work. It's about understanding those tasks, understanding what the activities are, and then planning and creating a work environment that enables that to occur, rather than us just putting bodies on bums and seats in workplaces. We've experienced so much through this period of time. We've changed so many things. We've had the opportunity to do so many things differently. There's so much that I don't want to lose from this period of time. So I think now's the time for us to reflect on that, to identify what's worked, look at what hasn't, and then start to look at how we're going to adapt and change ourselves into the future. And what we're doing with our clients at the moment is we're going through a 3-step process to help them reorientate themselves back into the workforce. So the first thing we're doing is we're empathizing. We're speaking with people, we're doing surveys, we're engaging with focus groups, we're trying to understand from the various organisations and the individuals within those organisations what's worked, what hasn't, what do we want to see differently into the future, what do we want to continue and take forward with us. So that first thing is really putting yourself in their shoes and understanding what it is that has worked for us and how do we want to continue that forward. The second one is around co-create. So as a group, working together to work out how we connect and we create an environment that supports us going forward. So everyone having an input, everyone having some ownership over that and developing a solution that's going to carry you forward. And then the last one is adapt. So we need to be changing our physical and our behavioural environments so that we can then actually adapt into the future and adopt some of these new behaviours and then change some things to better suit us as we move forward. So what we need to be looking at is as our return to work starts to happen, it's going to be very similar to the way that the restrictions have been lifted. It's going to happen in stages. And as we return into the work, we should have a staged approach for how we're going to slowly ramp up to ensure that we don't have any outbreaks in our own work environments and that everyone is feeling safe, they're feeling well, they're feeling healthy, and they're feeling very supported. So it's really about that physical, mental, and emotional well-being of all of our employees and making sure that we're taking care of them through this time. So some really quick tips to finish on is going to be consultation. Having that consultation with our employees and understanding what they need from us through this time, what their concerns are and how we can support them. And then having ways that we can have robust conversations with them so that they feel like they are being heard and that we're communicating back the actions that we're going to be taking to get everyone safely back into the work environment. So next week, we're going to be looking at how we can gather that information from our teams and then the ways in which we can then be re-communicating that back out to our teams as well so that everyone's feeling like they're feeling safe, they're supported, and they're feeling heard. So I'm really keen to hear if anyone's got anything that they would like to contribute to this morning's conversation about any concerns that they've got around returning back into the work environment, or any information that they think that is really relevant, or you've got any questions or concerns about anything, pop them in the comments now. What I think is going to be really important as we start to move forward into this is really taking that step back, having a look at what's worked, looking at what our workplaces are going to be doing for us as we move forward and how we can actually engage with our people to really connect in and create an environment that supports everybody as we move forward. Erin's just said she loves the idea of walking and talking meetings. So do I, Erin. I think they're fantastic because when we've been doing our morning huddles, a few of us have been taking our walks ad hoc, not every day, but going out and having a walk, you know, while we're on the phone in our morning huddles. It's a great opportunity, get a bit of exercise in, to get outside and get some fresh air as well, and then engaging in that conversation. You know, not everything needs to be face-to-face over a video. It can actually sometimes just be that audio. So but look, thank you very much everyone for joining us again this morning. We've had quite a few new faces online this morning, so welcome and thank you to everyone for joining us. As I said, next week we're going to be talking about how we can engage with our teams and the kind of information that we need to get, and then and disseminating that out. Oh, we've got a last comment. Elise said she's completely agrees with all our points, which is fantastic. Thank you, Elise. And a calm and rational approach. And look, I think that's generally my approach to most things, is having that calm and rational approach, because I think that when we can buy into some hysteria, but also I have a very, as I said, I'm very okay with germs and things like that, but I know that so many people aren't, and so it's about being very conscious about how this is actually impacting on other people, what their concerns are, and how we can then provide a support network that enables them to feel safe in coming back into the work environment. And that might take quite a lot of time for some people. Some people may not be comfortable coming back into the work environment until there's a vaccine available for the virus. So we need to be empathizing with people in various different situations. And, you know, they've all got very valid reasons for why they're feeling this way. And it's about understanding that and being able to support them. So, look, I look forward to chatting with you next week. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. And I'll see you next week. Bye.